You hear the term Dark Ages, and you probably think of ignorance, chaos, a total collapse of civilization, right? Well, what if that's only half the story? Today, we're going to take a look at how the fall of the world's greatest empire didn't just leave a huge hole, it actually forged a completely new world from the rubble. So let's jump in and see how it all went down.
So let's start with this huge question. What really happens when a massive, continent-spanning empire just falls apart? I mean, just think about it. Imagine the government you live under just vanishes overnight. No army, no police, no unified laws. That is the exact situation Europe was facing after Rome collapsed.
All right, so that's the big picture. Let's get into our first section here, a world after Rome. To really get why these new systems came to be, you first have to understand the sheer scale of the chaos that made them so necessary.
So, what did all that chaos really feel like for your average person on the ground? Well, it meant that the basic security they had known for centuries was just gone. This list here really paints a picture, but it wasn't just a list of separate problems. It was like a chain reaction, a total domino effect. With no central government, Europe just shattered into a million little kingdoms. And that made it incredibly unsafe. Because of that, the old trade routes fell apart, traveling became super risky, and people fled the cities, heading for the countryside, just hoping to find some safety.
And when we say unsafe, what are we really talking about? Well, it wasn't just local squabbles between petty warlords. No, Europe was getting absolutely hammered by outside forces from every single direction.
Seriously, look at this. It's coming from all sides. From the north, you've got the Vikings and their longships just terrorizing coastlines and sailing up rivers. From the east, you've got the Avars, incredibly skilled horsemen, launching these lightning-fast cavalry raids deep into Europe. And from the south, Muslim armies were pushing up from North Africa and into Spain. There was just nowhere to hide. Danger was everywhere.
But, you know, they say nature abhors a vacuum. Well, so does society. In the middle of all this chaos, two new, powerful forces started to rise up, providing the kind of structure and stability that people were desperate for.
One of the most powerful of these forces was, without a doubt, the Christian Church. Which brings up a really interesting question. How did an institution that's based on faith manage to create so much real-world order in a time defined by violence?
Well, they had this really smart two-part strategy. First, you had missionaries, guys like St. Patrick, who would travel to totally new pagan lands and convert entire kingdoms. This helped create a shared culture, a shared identity. And second, and this was maybe even more important for day-to-day life, you had monasteries. These places became the absolute pillars of their local communities, offering things no one else could: food, a safe place to stay, medicine, and even education.
Okay, so the church is handling the spiritual and social side of things. But you still need someone with swords to stop the raids, right? You need military muscle. The big question was, who was going to provide it? The answer came from a Germanic tribe that would end up laying the groundwork for modern-day France and Germany.
And that answer, it turns out, came from the Franks. Their king, Clovis, made an incredibly smart move. He converted his entire kingdom to Nicene Christianity. Now, this wasn't just a personal choice. It unified his people, and it got him a powerful alliance with the church and what was left of the old Roman nobles. It was a brilliant political play.
Then you get a guy with an awesome nickname, Charles Martel, or the Hammer, and he definitely earned it. He's the one who famously stopped the Muslim armies from advancing further into Western Europe at the Battle of Tours. That victory was huge. It secured the kingdom from a massive threat and let it grow even stronger.
And that brings us to the absolute giant of this era, Charlemagne, which just means Charles the Great. This guy didn't just defend the kingdom, he expanded it into a massive empire. He became so powerful that on Christmas Day in the year 800, the Pope actually crowned him Emperor of the Romans. This was a massive deal, reviving a title that hadn't been used in centuries. He kicked off a mini golden age, building roads, schools, and bringing back law and order across his lands.
The thing is, an empire built by one incredible guy is really tough to hold together after he's gone. After Charlemagne died, his empire fractured, but the threats didn't go away. The need for protection from Vikings and rival lords was stronger than ever, and this desperate need for safety gave rise to the system that would define the era: feudalism.
So what is this thing, feudalism? At its core, it was a decentralized system built on a whole network of deals for survival. Everybody owed something to somebody else.
It all started with the Lord. He was a nobleman, a warrior, someone with the power to offer protection.
But, of course, a lord couldn't fight all his battles alone, so he would grant chunks of his land to other nobles, called vassals. In exchange, those vassals promised their loyalty and, most importantly, their military service.
And at the very bottom of this whole structure were the serfs. Now, they weren't exactly slaves, but they were tied to the land. They worked the fields, and in return, the Lord was supposed to protect them from all those threats we talked about.
And the thing that made this entire system work, the currency of the day, wasn't really money. It was land. And a piece of land granted by a lord to a vassal was called a fief.
So this table right here, it boils the whole thing down. This is the feudal contract. It was a simple but powerful bargain. The vassal gave military service and got land. The serf gave their labor and got protection. Everything, and I mean everything, revolved around this system of mutual obligations.
And as you can probably guess, this whole system created a super rigid social ladder, a pyramid. At the very top, you had the king, who was theoretically the owner of all the land. Right below him were his direct vassals, the most powerful lords like dukes and counts. And they had their own vassals, like barons, and on it went, all the way down to a simple knight who might not even have his own land yet. And at the very bottom, holding it all up, was the huge majority of the population, the peasants and serfs.
Now, a system that's built from the ground up on military service is bound to create an icon, right? And that icon was, of course, the knight. So let's take a closer look at who these warriors really were.
See, a knight wasn't just any old soldier. They were professional, noble warriors. And being a knight was incredibly expensive. You needed a war horse, heavy armor, a bunch of different weapons. This meant they pretty much had to come from the aristocracy. And they spent their entire lives training for one thing: war.
Now, to balance out the brutality of their job, there was supposed to be a moral code, chivalry. This code said they had to be good Christians, defend the church and the weak, be loyal to their Lord, and always show courage, honesty, and generosity. Now, how often they actually lived up to all that, well, that's another story.
And on the battlefield, the knight was an absolute game changer. Think of them like a medieval tank. They were heavy cavalry that charge in a tight, disciplined formation, lower those long lances, and just shatter enemy infantry lines. For hundreds of years, there was nothing else like them.
And that brings us right back to where we started, the problem of how to survive in a chaotic, dangerous world. Feudalism provided an answer, but that answer came with a heavy price. Which leaves us with one last question to think about. Was giving up your freedom for the promise of protection a fair trade? For millions of people back then, the answer was a simple and necessary yes.